Okay, well, I'm
gonna
going to go ahead.
mute
Yeah, go
myself
ahead.
and just
Do what you need to do. Okay, all right. So I'm seeing, sorry, I'm just getting a sense of who we've got. Okay, so my name is Jenny Doak Kearns. I am the Director for Justice Affected Communities, and also I am the Director of Academic Services on the Newton campus. So just to give you a little background on how I came here to talk to you about test anxiety today. I've been with DMACC for almost 8 years now, but I am also a DMACC graduate. I went to DMACC out of high school, and that's how I started my own educational career. I used to be an English teacher, so I see that you guys are working on the HiSET writing right now, so I get that. I feel your pain sometimes here. So when I came to DMACC in 2013, I became their director of their Academic Achievement Center and an English faculty member. So so I did teach a lot of composition, but then I also, in my role at the Academic Achievement Center, I oversaw their HiSET program and ELL programs and things like that. So I'm very, very acquainted with HiSET. So I've helped a lot of students get equipped for HiSET and get ready to take those tests. And now part of my role at DMACC is chief test examiner for HiSET. So I'm the one that gets to go around and make sure all your testing centers are up to snuff and everything. But I guess what I'm trying to say is I do know HiSET very well. And I appreciate and understand the challenge that it can be for students as they're going through this process. Because you have 5 very high stakes tests that you have to pass. And testing is not always everybody's jam. And that's part of the reason I started doing this research and looking into test anxiety. In the Academic Achievement Center, students would come in for help, they'd come in for tutoring, they'd come in for, how do I get on Blackboard, all kinds of things like that, help with my math lab, things they were doing for school. And often we had people ask for help preparing for tests. And that's a thing. So, and we'll talk about this. There's a difference between being a bad tester, and not using that word bad in a bad way, if you will, or being an ineffective studier, an ineffective tester, or an ineffective studier. And we'll talk about that. So, but what I found was a lot of students really, really needed help with test anxiety. So that was not something that I personally had, that was not my thing. I enjoyed testing as I was a kid. That was my chance to show off a little bit. So I had to kind of change my mindset and put myself in the shoes of my students who maybe weren't as comfortable in that situation. So that being said, I'll go ahead and start let me see here, share screen, start my PowerPoint. Give me just a second. There we go. Allow. And it says Firefox cannot allow permanent access to your screen. Oh, no problem. Allow. There we go. Sorry, I'm learning this as I go, everybody. I don't usually use Collaborate. Okay, so again, as I said, this is how can you guys see my screen now?
Yes, it
okay,
is.
Just want to make.
It's the whole.
The whole thing. Okay, because when I shared it, I couldn't see you guys anymore, so I just wanted to make sure. Okay, so basically today we're going to talk about what is anxiety, and I think we all can have our own experiences with that. How do we lessen test anxiety? What to do on actual test day, like little things that you can be thinking about and working on. And then briefly we'll talk about strategies for specific testing formats like essays or multiple choice questions or things like that. And I always I actually started out giving this presentation not to students but to instructors, because I think that a lot of the responsibility is on instructors to create effective tests and to adequately prepare their students for tests. So so that's, I'm going to talk a little bit to that too, because I want you guys to understand that just because the instructor created it, it doesn't make it perfect. So just so you know. All right. So what is anxiety? Now, normally I would do this in a classroom. It would be easy for us to bounce back and forth, but I'm going to have to just kind of share some of the things that that students usually share with me. But most students, when they feel test anxiety or anxiety in an academic setting, it really can it can really adversely, negatively affect the work that they're doing. There's nothing worse than preparing and preparing and preparing for something and feeling okay about it, and then getting there and being like, you know, it's not the content that's the problem, it's the fact that I can't get my head in the right place. It's nerves or something happened or something else like that. So that being said, there are a lot of, like I said, ways that, let me go back a second too. There are different ways that anxiety can manifest itself physically for us. It can increase our heart rate. It can increase our breathing can quicken. We can get shaky. We can feel flushed. And as you can imagine, none of those things are going to put you in a good position to be taking a test, especially one that's as important as your HiSET tests are. So this also asks which students receive support in testing through seminars, classes, or supplemental instruction. And the answer to that is very, very few. One of the things that I found in my research is that most students never have been actually sat down and taught strategies for effective testing. And think about it, you started taking tests, what, second, third grade? In fact, it's really, really common. I know I've heard this anecdotally several times. I don't have something to cite with it, but often students start to report more stress and less satisfaction with schooling right about third grade. Like, school is fun in kindergarten, first and second grade. In third grade, it starts getting stressful. Funny, that's also when they start doing a lot of the big high stakes testing, the MAP scores and things like that. And it's so you can see that testing can have a serious effect on not only how you view that test, but also how you view your whole academic experience. So I think it's really important that your instructors are giving you guys the opportunity to talk about not just the test, but how you test, because that's extremely, extremely important. There are a lot of things that you can do to make yourself more successful and be more prepared as you're testing. So I told you that I didn't have a big problem with testing as a kid or going up. And trust me, don't get me wrong, I've had, especially into college, tests that I've super stressed about, but not to the effect where I would say I had like anxiety that was affecting the way I was taking the test. And let's go back and say one thing too that's really important. You should have some healthy level of anxiety going into a test. And when I say anxiety, maybe a better way would be stress or focus or something like that. You don't want to go in like, I don't care about this. You know, you want to know there's a healthy level of almost maybe respect is the better word that I could use for it, for going into this situation and knowing that it's important and knowing that you need to get your head in the game and do your best. When it's more than that, when it's those physical things that we talked about, that's what I'm talking about with test anxiety. So like I said, I had to kind of put myself in the shoes of my students, and I thought, what is something that a lot of people don't struggle with that drives me up the wall? And as you can imagine, as this has been sitting in front of you, for years and years, I hated flying. I wouldn't even say I hated flying. I was phobic about it. I didn't do it. I had the opportunity to visit Ireland with family in my 20s. I didn't go. I had family that lived in Hawaii when I was in high school. I never went and visited them, even though my sister did, and they offered to fly me out. I couldn't do it. In fact, I did not get on an airplane until I was 36 years old. And yeah.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know that your PowerPoint, it's not like in slideshow mode. So
Okay.
we're just seeing like the very beginning of it. So like if you go slideshow,
Okay,
start.
let me go back. Okay, how about this?
Okay, so that's clicking them through the slides for sure. It's still not
Right.
like in presentation mode, but at least that way it's clicking through the slides.
Right, because when I'm in presentation mode now, and it's not, yeah, we'll just click through the slides. How's that?
Okay, cool.
So I had mentioned here that most students don't have formal test strategies, but so I was likening that experience for me. I hated flying, really seriously hated it. Basically, long story short, I lost a lot of really cool opportunities because I wouldn't get on an airplane. So finally, I did. Literally booked a trip for a weekend that was basically to get on an airplane, go to Las Vegas, be there for 2 days and come back. And the biggest point of the trip was the airplane. I was so stressed, but I went through and I taught myself as much as I could. I listened to videos about what different sounds are when you hear, because there are a lot of sounds on an airplane. And I was sure every one of them was going to send us spiraling into our doom. But I really tried to inform myself about it and make it so I didn't necessarily instead think about it like this. That's what I always thought about getting on an airplane. But now, you know, that was several years ago, I think 10 years ago now since I flew the first time. And honestly, during this last year, when all of us can't do a lot of the things that we normally would do, this has been one of the things that I've missed the most. The getting out there and getting to see different things and new experiences and new places. I miss traveling so much. I may never love the airplane, but I love the thing that it allows me to do, and that is to go and grow professionally and go to conferences. And so I'm not saying you're going to necessarily love testing. That's okay. But if you know that it's an issue for you, you can go in ready to go with some tools in your toolbox and be more prepared to do it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So test anxiety, first of all, who is affected? First of all, students at all levels. Like I said, you have kids that are reporting in elementary school that they're stressed by testing. Clearly, it's a high school, all the way. It's really common in the college setting, especially in non-traditional students. And anybody who's going through the HiSET program is going to be considered a non-traditional student just because you didn't take the route that everyone else, you know, not everyone. They always make it sound like there's this one route that's correct. That is not true. Many of us have a different road to get where we're going to go. But this non-traditional students would be students who didn't go straight to college after high school, students who got their HiSET and then went on to college. Or I was a non-traditional student. I was a single parent when I started college. So, and it's often people who like come back later. So, and students experiencing new platforms. Man, have we all gotten a crash course in technology this year? You know, again, even just logging in today, I don't normally use Collaborate. I tend to use Teams or Zoom. And, you know, even those I had to learn how to do this year. I really wasn't an expert on those before that. So it can be really, really hard for students if they have to learn Blackboard or they have to learn Collaborate. They have to learn something on their computer. And then, so that's one level. And then you have to take the test on top of that. So it can be, as you can imagine, that you may even understand that can be really super stressful for students. So what are the effects of test anxiety? Clearly, you often have diminished achievement. And I say often, it's, you know, I tell the story all the time of a student who, one of the first ones who I really worked with seriously with test anxiety. And she actually was an extremely talented student. She had, gosh, like a 3.6 or 3.7 GPA. She had taken a full year of classes. She was in her second year. Yet every year or every time she took a big test that you know really mattered, she would get like physical symptoms of anxiety. So she actually had accommodations, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But that's where she's applied and said, look, this is a serious problem for me, and I need a little bit of help outside of what students normally get. So a common accommodation for test anxiety is testing outside of the classroom. or something like that. So she would sometimes come in. We had a little testing room in the Academic Achievement Center, and I could see her from where my desk was. And so I'd kind of keep an eye on her when she was in there. And she could take the test there, and she could get up, and if she needed to, she could get up, walk around the room quickly, sit back down, and get back to town. And you know, I saw her really struggling one day, and she, you know, she had to do that a couple times, and she did finish. And afterwards, I'm like, what was going on? I'm like, you know, I'm seeing everything. Your grades, you know, you probably did great on this test. Your grades aren't telling me this is an issue. What is going on? And she told me, she was probably in her late 20s. She told me that out of high school, she had gone straight to Iowa State. And she was a first generation college student. Her parents had not gone to college, and they paid for her to go to Iowa State, and she went into the engineering program, which is a really challenging program. And she failed out her second semester. And that's some challenging stuff there. And so now when she, you know, it took her a number of years. She felt like she had failed her parents. She felt like she had wasted their money. She felt like she had wasted her own time. And she was really ashamed of herself for it. And when she finally got up the nerve to go back to school, again, she's very smart. She was doing very well, but every time she got in a situation where she imagined she could fail again, that was all she could think of. All she could imagine was what that felt like to fail when she was at Iowa State. So we ended up having a lot of talks about what was different, and what the evidence was. That's something you have to look at a lot. Like, I have so many students who will say, oh my God, I'm going to do horrible on this. I'm like, really? What evidence do you have of that? All of your prep for this has been fantastic. Your OPT scores are really good, or you know, you've really come far. You were here and now you're here, and that's a big difference. So, you know, sometimes you have to check that self-talk that you have, you know, because we always have this, you know, tape running in our heads of what we should or shouldn't be doing, or should or shouldn't feel or think or do. And sometimes you have to check that and say, you know, I know I'm afraid I'm going to fail, but I'm not failing right now. I've been doing really, really well. So that's a really important thing to do too. So as I said, a lot of students though do experience diminished achievement, meaning that they have anxiety to the level that allows them not to perform as well as they could. They'll have those physical symptoms we talked about. Again, just like this student I just told you about, decreased self-esteem. Like, she felt bad about herself. First of all, she felt bad that if she was going to fail again. And second of all, she felt bad because she couldn't get over what had happened before and knew she was making a bigger deal out of it than she needed to. So there was just this like never-ending vicious cycle of you know, beating herself up about a situation. And clearly, as you can imagine, if people are feeling the experience all the time, they're much more likely to say, never mind, forget it. So you have lower completion rates with students who are affected by this. So as I said, I mentioned accommodations. Let me go a little bit more into detail with that. So every campus, and you are part of whatever campus you're coming from, even as a HiSET student, every campus has a disability services coordinator. So you can, and if you're taking DMAT classes, you would apply through that disability services coordinator and through the website, and I can help you connect with that if you feel like that's a thing, for accommodations for classes. But there are also accommodations for the HiSET test, and there's a process that you would go through to apply for that. And these accommodations aren't just for anxiety. It could be if you had a visual disability. You could have like a larger screen or things like that. There are a lot of different things that can be, you know, reading disabilities or hearing disabilities, things like that. So if you feel like there's something that maybe you received help with when you were in high school and you're not getting that now, have a conversation with your instructor, and if they need any help at all or want to chat with me about it, if I can't help them, I can refer them to someone who can. So just a thought about that. And then, I made my own bullet point for the math anxiety. And I really should go back to instead say subject-specific anxiety. Because while math is probably the most common one students come in and say they're all worried about, writing is the second most common. In fact, that's why the state of Iowa will not allow you to save writing and math for last, because so many students would knock out those other 3 tests and then just never come back. So I understand that these, either math or writing, these can be really, really stressful tests. And it's funny, especially with math, I can't tell you how often students will come in to ask questions about the HiSET and say, they'll come to the desk back in the day when we could just come to the desk, and they'd say, okay, I'm really excited to do this, or I'm really going to do this, but I'm not great at math. I'm like, yeah, you and everybody else that walks up here is what they say. And usually students are better than they think they are. So there's something about math that we really get hung up on though often. So let's talk a little bit about lessening test anxiety. So one of the biggest things that you can do is to prepare effectively. I mentioned earlier that some students say that people will come in and say, oh, I have test anxiety, or I'm a bad tester, or whatever. And it's not a problem with testing, it's a problem with preparation, with studying. A lot of students don't effectively know how to study. And that's something that you can get help with from your academic achievements and from your instructors and things like that. Because again, it's one of those things that, oh, we've been taking tests forever, so you don't really have to, they've been taking tests since 3rd grade, we don't have to show them how to do it. Well, if you're doing it wrong and you keep doing it wrong, that's not helping you. Same thing with studying. I have a lot of students, I'll ask them, okay, turn to the first page of your chapter, open it up, where do you start reading? And they go down and they point to the first paragraph. And it's like, okay, they just skipped over all of the objectives, the things that it tells you that you're supposed to learn in the chapter, maybe some insights going forward. So there are a lot of different things that you can do to increase your study habits. And there are actually a lot of great resources online, and DMACC even offers a class on study skills. So hopefully you'll go forward in DMACC and continue to join us for a while, and that might be something that is advantageous for you. And use your resources. I can't tell you how many times I've given a test. I was an English teacher, so I did some literature tests, but mostly my tests would be in the form of an essay, and I would say, you can outline it, you can bring notes, you can do some research and bring it in. And always several of the students would neglect to do that. And it's like, use the resources that are available to you. If you can use a calendar, don't forget your calendar, or calculator, excuse me, don't forget your calculator. You've got to make it work for you. And again, organization is huge, not just organization in your studying and in your classwork, but organization in your life a little bit. And this kind of goes right along with planning. I guarantee you, the day that I've got something huge going on at work, or if I have to give a big presentation or something like that, and I'm stressed out about it anyway, that's going to be the day that my kids are going to take twice as long to get out the door to go to school. And so if I can have their shoes laid out, if I can have their clothes laid out, if I can have my own lunch made already, all those things, if I know where Grace's cello is, all those things, it makes the world a whole lot easier, and it lowers that stress level. Anything that you can do to just kind of keep on an even keel on that important day is really, really important. And relaxation techniques, okay? So these don't have to be like dramatic yoga moves or anything else like that, but just as being aware of your own body. So much of this is about self-awareness. It's about what's normal for you, what's the baseline for you. Like, if you normally are a little bit wound up, then that's one thing. Some people are super even keel and a little bit of stress freaks them out. But when you start to feel like you're going off of whatever your baseline is that feels good to you, listen to your body, slow your breathing. Slowing your breathing and breathing deeply and concentrating on that breathing actually has physiological effects on your body, positive physiological effects. It lowers your heart rate, it tends to calm you, and it's such a simple thing to do. And again, being cognizant of that self-talk. There's so so many stories we tell ourselves in our heads, and there's so many things that we get hung up on, and we'll point back to that time that it didn't work out, even though it worked out 10 other times just fine. But unfortunately, those are often it's those harder times that keep sticking with us. And visualization is really important. I had a student who was struggling to pass a test, and I was trying to figure out what was going on because she was doing pretty well with her practice. And she told me, she's like, I've taken this test 2 times. I get to take it 1 more time. And if I don't pass it, I'm done. She was going into nursing school. And she said, and every time I think about taking this test, all I can imagine is the look on the way I felt when I was told the last 2 times that I didn't pass. And so we had a conversation about visualizing. All she was doing in her head was playing over and over and over again the story of failing. And so I asked her to create the story of being successful. So what would it look like? Like, what, you come out of the test and the test administrator says, yay, you passed. Now what would that feel like? What will she say to you? Is she going to tell you that you need to call this person or send the test results over here or this, that, or the other? And then when you get out to your car, who are you going to call? And she's like, I'm going to call my husband. And she was like starting to get like teary because she was imagining it. And it made all the difference in the world for her, because she had spent so much time worrying about failure that she hadn't spent any time thinking about success. And often it's hard to make something happen if we can't even imagine it. So I really, really challenge you to imagine your own success sometimes. And just a little note here, if you're like me, I always think that I should be the first one done with everything or whatever. But at the same time, I know after years and years and years of teaching, and your instructors will tell you the same thing, those who get done first are not always doing the best, okay? In other words, a lot of people that rush through tests really don't perform as well as they could have. When people are taking a HiSET test on our campus and they come out after like 20 minutes, the instructors and I just look at each other and go, oh no, because we know that they didn't give it the time or the effort that really they could have. Another thing, and this is just kind of a thought, if this is something you deal with, is writing about test anxiety seems to really help lessen the effect of it. And it wouldn't even be, it should be something you do more than once. So for instance, when I taught study skills, on the Newton campus, every Friday we would journal about what the week was like for us academically, what went well, what we worried about the next week. And then if we'd said, oh, I'm really worried about this test or whatever on Wednesday, that next Friday we would say, okay, and here's how it went. And more often than not, students saw, as they were documenting this, that they often thought things were going to be really bad, and they weren't. It really wasn't as bad as they thought. So just something to think about. And again, so that test day, what's a good way to get this going and in a positive way? So get there on time and with your materials. So again, if they say you can use scratch paper, if they say you can use a calculator, if you go to take your HiSET test and you need an ID, make sure you have your ID. I don't know how many students don't get to test because they forget that. Utilize those relaxation techniques. When you get there, if you can, I know different test formats are different, but if you can look over the test, that's really good. That way you know what's in front of you. If there's going to be a surprise essay test at the end or something, you want to know that going in. Set expectations, and this is kind of more like going into the test. With HiSET, for instance, you don't have to get all of them right. Now you want to get as many right as possible, but I have students who think, as soon as they start missing questions, oh my gosh, this is not going to work. And it's like, you do get to miss a couple of questions. So keep your head in the game, knowing that, you are going to run into some rough runs. But you can go back, go and do the ones you're most familiar, or, the ones you know best first, and then go back and do 5 more, and then to go do the next 5. I have an instructor who teaches that. He's a HiSET math instructor, and he has the students go through the test and select, especially with the OPTs, select 10 that they feel really comfortable doing. And then they do those 10. And then they select 5 more. And then they do those 5. And then they do 5 more. And then when they get down to like 3 or 4 minutes left, they go back in and they guess on the ones that are still empty. Because if it's empty, it's wrong. If you happen to choose the right one when you guess, hey, there you go. You're already becoming familiar with the format. That's one thing nice about HiSET classes. You're being really well prepared for what to expect on those tests. Again, and the previous teacher expectations. I know that your instructors here, again, they've set very clear expectations for you. You know what you need to get done. And as you get there, think about that when you're inside the test. And don't be afraid to ask for clarification. Now, I know in the HiSET test, when you're taking the original, we can't help you with the question. But I had a student whose monitor wasn't on display correctly, and it was missing, like, there was like ABC and no D. And like, she went through a lot of the test before mentioning that and probably got a lot wrong. We had to do an incident report and everything. So if something seems like it's not right, it's okay to ask. The worst thing they're going to do is say, oh, I can't answer that question, or say, oh, it's right, you just have to do it this way. But again, I can tell you, as someone who's written several tests over the years, several, I've made major mistakes on them. There's one that everybody missed, number 16 every year. And I always said I was going to go back and look. And when I finally did, I'm like, yeah, that question's messed up. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Often that's the way your instructors find out that there is a problem. And we've actually also identified problems on the OPTs. So that helps us too. So I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I want to just really quickly, and this is actually the shortest part of the presentation, because there's no real trick to getting questions right. I wish there was. I wish I could tell you that, but you don't want that anyway, because you want to actually show what you've learned. But there are some things that you can keep in mind when you're doing different testing formats. So for instance, multiple choice questions, you have the STEM, that's the like, name or which of these four do this. And the incorrect answers are the distractors of the A, B, C, and D. You want to rule out those obviously wrong answers. If you have 4 options, usually there's 1 or 2 you can look at right away and say, no, that's not it. And then if you're going from 4 options to 2 options, that makes your chances of being correct way, way better. And again, know your options. Sometimes it will say which of these is the correct answer, or which of these or all of these are the correct answer except. Make sure you read those questions really well. And often this is a mistake that students make when they're actually very prepared for a test, because they feel, I don't want to say overconfident, but they don't feel like they have to be as careful as maybe they need to be. And often that's when you make those silly mistakes. So it's always good also, if you have time at the end of the test, to go back and look at your multiple choice questions. And just another little thing that I've noticed and I've seen in my readings is look for those repeated elements. If you have a question that you have no idea what the answer is, if one of the answers is repeated in several of the options, that's probably the correct answer, especially if there are more of them. So for instance, in this one, what 3 US states all have cities called Des Moines? C is the correct answer. And as you'll see, Iowa, New Mexico, and Washington appear in just about all of those possible answers. So, and then that's the only one where they're all together. So just a thought there. True false questions, these are not hard to, we've done these, you know what they are. And you've got a 50-50 chance. So, but be careful. A lot of times they trick you up with the always or never answers. Like, you should always do this, or you should never do this. There are very few things in life that you should always or never do. And often those are the ways that that true false questions can get tricky. And if it's a paper test or something that you have sitting in front of you, sometimes it's important to highlight those important keywords or phrases. That can keep you focused on what you should be thinking about. And again, never leave it blank. It's 50%. This is your best chance in the whole test of getting an answer right. Matching questions, that's when you have like 1 through 10 on one side and A through whatever on the other. Make sure you read the directions. You want to know what's the basis for matching. Is it a person and an accomplishment that they had? Is it a time period and something that happened in that time period? You want to make sure you're really clear on that. And again, how often can options be used? There's nothing worse to me than one of these that lets you use the same option more than once, because that just blows my whole program. Because one of the best things to do is, most of them are 1 for 1, like you use each one each time. So there you go in again and you do the easy ones first, the ones that you're pretty confident. And now you've narrowed it down. Instead of having 10 options, you've got 5 options for these others. And also, one thing that's nice too, the first column is the 1 through 10 or whatever, and then the second column is the one next to it on the right. And if you cover up that one on the right and just look at those first 10 things that you're supposed to match with, ask yourself what you remember about each of those. It might prompt you to pick the right answer on the other side. Okay, here's one that I'm sure that your instructors have said to you several times, but it's one of the biggest things that, like, if you don't come out of anything or out of this with anything today, please think about this. Everybody wants scratch paper for the math test. For heaven's sake, please use scratch paper for the essay as well. If you take 2 minutes and do a quick, you're doing a 4 or 5 paragraph essay, you have very specific things you have to do in that essay. Give your opinion on something, support it in 2 to 3 additional paragraphs. In the conclusion, you have to do a certain amount of things. Jot that down. I'm not saying you have to write a single complete sentence. This is just a place for you to put all of those ideas together, and it serves as a roadmap as you go forward and sit down to actually write that write that essay. So, and again, look for multiple elements of the question and answer the whole question. And what do I mean by that? Often it's not just what was the significance of the scaffold in the book, The Scarlet Letter. Students would go, oh, I know that, and they wouldn't realize, and it goes on to say, and what was the significance of that and how did that parallel Hawthorne's life and early experience? So they would answer the first part of the question, but they wouldn't answer the second part of the question. So make sure that you're really answering the question that's being posed to you. And like I said, really quickly, I'll just tell you what I tell instructors. You have the right to quality testing and quality materials, and they have the obligation to provide that to you. So instructors should be consistent in testing expectations, unless they tell you otherwise. If something was okay in one test, it should be okay in the other. And again, I think that it's important that we do teach test-taking skills, or at least say, this is the kind of thing you need to watch for as we're testing. This is perfect for learning center seminars, freshman seminars like SDV 108 that you might take if you go on to take classes at EMAC, and for some of the courses that get students ready for college as well. And instructors write good tests. As Disability Services Liaison on the Newton campus, I frequently work with students that have visual or reading disabilities, and I will have to read tests to them. And I have to read it exactly like it is written. I can't change wording. If it's spelled wrong, I can't do. It is frustrating how often I see some errors that could really, really easily have been avoided. Ambiguous questions. There's nothing wrong with a question being difficult and making you use your critical thinking strategies, but they shouldn't truly be ambiguous where it could be 2 other things, or if the directions are unclear on exactly what you should do. We should really, really set you up to succeed. So that is the end of what I have here. Let me see here. All right, any questions? Anything? I know we don't have a lot of time for questions right now, but if there's anything that you'd like me to touch on or anything right now, I'm happy to do so. Paige, anything else that you'd like me to talk about quickly?
I don't think so. Does anybody have any questions? If so, please go ahead and unmute yourself, raise your hand. But by all means, if you have questions, then let's hear them.
No, she touched everything, so
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I would encourage all of you, if you think of something later or you want to know how to get, yeah, you're welcome, Gabby. If you want to, follow up or have another conversation, just let your instructors know and they will help you reach out to me, and I'd love to chat with you. So
Thank you.
you guys,
Thank you
thanks for
so
letting
much.
me come and visit you today.
Thank you. Thank you. God bless.
Yeah, have a good day.
Have a great afternoon.
Yeah, thank you.